So I think this is the moment to slowly give voice to Steve. I know he mentioned a couple of times in his emails to us about uncertainty. So let's check how certain he is about the uncertainty principle. Steve, over to you.
Well, thank you, Greg. I didn't think we were going to go straight into quantum theory. I'm assuming you were talking about Heisenberg's uncertainty theory. I might say keep that up my sleeve. I've only got short sleeves, so you might see. I might save that one for later. But I am going to make a couple of introductory comments about uncertainty and also a confession. Greg alluded to the fact that he found our last webinar to be very powerful. And I have to say that I found it very powerful as well. And I spent an awful lot of time over the weekend and earlier this week trying to figure out what had been going on. There was something very strong in the meeting. And why I started to think about uncertainty was that I was doing all of this thinking and I never reached the knowing. I never reached the conclusion to my thoughts. But on Monday, I guess this is where I made my first big mistake. On Monday, I prepared the email to go out to everybody, inviting them. And I think in that I probably mentioned that we might well start the meeting with uncertainty. I might have put that on Facebook. I can't remember. And that's far too early in the week for me to be starting to think about this webinar. My preference is to think about this webinar about 5 seconds before 6 o'clock in the evening, London time. But our brains don't work like that, unfortunately, no matter how much we might like them to. And my confession is that at 3:30 this morning, I woke up. Well, there's nothing unusual about that. I quite often wake up in the night and have a little think about stuff and then go back to sleep. The difference was that last night, I didn't go back to sleep at all. And the more I tried to, and I know all of these techniques, the harder it was, because I just couldn't get this thought of uncertainty out of my head. The first thing was, waking up, tomorrow's Friday, tomorrow's Thursday, I got the show to do, thinking about my diary. But, the thoughts go spinning round and round. And you've heard me talking a lot about the unconscious mind and the conscious mind. And very often when I talk about the conscious mind, I substitute ego. I call it ego. I know that's a simplification, but so much of the conscious mind is ego. Ego is the great controller that believes that it knows better than anybody else, believes that it's in charge of our life, and is always rather cynical and skeptical, and certainly can be very self-critical, and is perhaps the thing that gets in the way of peak performance or the Zen mind state or whatever we want to call it more than anything else. And my ego was having a field day at 3:30. It was asking me questions like, well, how exactly are you going to start? I mean, which way are you going to approach uncertainty? And answers like, well, I don't know, I'm not certain, didn't do any good. Well, isn't it time that you were certain? I mean, the thoughts were crazy. And I think, as I said, because I'd started thinking about it on Monday, I'd probably set myself up for it. But it did make me, in the end, I just gave up trying to go back to sleep. And next thing I did, I think I did actually go to sleep for half an hour or so. But there's a very good book by Steve Peters, Dr. Steve Peters, called The Chimp Paradox. So some of you might have read it. Steve Peters was and may still be, as far as I know, in charge of he's a psychiatrist, and he certainly was in charge of the UK Olympic cycling teams. And of course, they've been very successful. In this country, we're very successful at sports that involve sitting down. So we're good at cycling, we're good at horse sports, we're good at canoeing. But when it comes to jumping over things and throwing spears and stuff, or running fast without falling over, sadly, we're not so good. Anyway, Steve Peters I don't remember too much about his book. He had a very eloquent way. All of us who are in this game, we all talk about much the same thing, but we have our own models for describing it and metaphors for describing it. And it's all one way or another about getting into the power of the unconscious mind and quietening down the ego. And I think Steve Peters didn't use the word, but I mean, to him, the ego is what he called the chimp paradox. And he's not alone there. I mean, I remembered when I had my first job as a doctor working in the oil industry, which was a long time ago, in a part of Africa that took you 2 or 3 days to get to, and no other doctors wanted to go. And I wondered how I got the job so easily. And I wondered why the pay was a bit more than I was working as a junior surgeon in the National Health Service. But they decided that I ought to know a bit about how the real world works. And they had this expert come out from the States to talk to all of us. And his subject was the art of feeding and looking after monkeys. And monkeys are monkeys are basically, if you're sitting across the desk from somebody, in today's world, it could be a client of one of your clients, or it could be a member of your family. They will have a monkey or two on their shoulder that are causing all kinds of problems and getting in the way of stuff. And the art of having this conversation is that you get rid of all the monkeys who are making your life a misery over to the other person, so they've got the problem of finding the bananas and all the rest of it and keeping them happy. Other people call it kicking the can down the road, or shoving the buck, or something like that. So I guess Steve Peters talks about chimps, and years ago people talked about the art of feeding monkeys. But the fact is that sometimes ego gets in the way, and it doesn't matter what you call it. And it was definitely getting in the way of me. So I guess it might be the word that spooked ego, uncertainty, because it's a powerful word, uncertainty. I actually love to live by uncertainty, or I thought I did. Now I just wonder if there's a bit of a pushback here. And I was thinking about my own situation. Well, we're all living in times of COVID, or I prefer just to call it the virus, which is a nuisance to everyone, more than a nuisance. So unfortunately, it's taken thousands of people with it. But, you know, I'm lucky. Compared to most of the world, I'm lucky. I don't have the uncertainties that people in the developing world have, whose lives are being devastated an awful lot more. They have got things that would drive us crazy with worry. I don't have to worry about things like that too much. But even so, the uncertainty was there. And the reason why uncertainty is important, because I think I remember saying at some point last week that I don't like to go into meetings or anything when I'm totally prepared for everything. Because if I do that, or if any of us do that, what we've done is we've built a box around us. We've built a comfort box, and it's lined with our comfort blankets. And it's a very comfortable place to be. But comfort gets in the way of new thought. It gets in the way of creativity. If we want to be comfortable, it means we just carry on doing the same old stuff. It's like going to school. Schools are not about educating kids, unfortunately, and neither are universities for that matter. They're about teaching people how to remember stuff that other people have remembered. There's very little creation that goes on, as far as I know, although I do know that things are changing, and I talk to university lecturers and teachers and stuff, and they're all trying to encourage people to get out of the box, but I'm not sure they're doing it radically enough. And they're going to find it a tough call, because we've got conditioned now to staying next to our comfort blanket in our box. But the reason why uncertainty is so powerful is because there are no walls to it. Anything can happen. When you approach anything from an uncertain perspective, then you don't know what's going to happen. And the chances are it's going to be good, it's going to be unexpected, it's going to be powerful. And the chances are that it's going to be real, whatever real means. You know, you're more likely to talk about a universal truth or something like that. And getting back to quantum theory just for a second before it makes everybody switch off, I mean, this is what Heisenberg was saying. He said, if you study one thing, then it starts in some magical way affecting the behavior of something else. So, you know, the universe does not like being studied. It doesn't like having laws and things applied to it. And I guess we're a part of the universe, and so we must be the same. So that's a lot more than I actually planned on talking about uncertainty. But hopefully that has kicked off the show. But as I said last week, the show is about you, all of you, and it's about our little community that we have here. And it's about what we bring to the table, the big questions or the small questions that we might have, our own comments, our own opinions. And there are pretty much no rules. I guess if we were going to have a rule, it would be just don't get too comfortable. Keep things a bit uncertain, keep us all a little bit on edge. If you don't live on the edge, you're taking up too much space, is what they used to tell us. We don't want anybody to fall off the edge, though. So what do you think so far? Anybody got any views on this or anything? I wasn't planning for us to spend the whole evening talking about uncertainty, and I don't imagine we will.
I haven't seen anyone yet raising a hand. I can ask a question then. Oh, there is Christine. Yeah, Christine, go ahead. I'm gonna keep my up the sleeve then.
Hello, everyone. Dr. Steve, I know you know a lot about luck. So where does luck come into uncertainty?
Yeah, I'm always delighted when you ask a question, but also there's a shiver of fear goes down my spine because I know it's going to be a tough one. Well, where does luck come in uncertainty? I would say that luck comes because luck strikes when you least expect it to very often, or when you least even think about it. There's two approaches to success in life. One is the clipboard approach, where you write down your goals and your objectives, and you have an annual management meeting where you get appraised on your results and you get rewarded or punished depending on your results. And at the beginning of the year, the cycle starts again, and your manager will say, you know, come on, Steve, what are you going to do this year? How are you going to justify how much money we pay you? Well, nobody pays me anything now. I work for myself, and I've never worked for a worse boss in my life, but never mind. I never worked for so many hours either. But there's no point going to the union. They won't help me with this one. And a better approach would, my humble opinion, would be just to experiment and say to the people who work with you, or for your bosses to say to you, what are you going to do this year? And you would say, well, I don't really know. I'm going to carry on enjoying my work. So I like this job. I don't really know. I know some things that I'd like to do. I know some things that feel quite impossible, really. And I don't really want to write them down, because if I don't achieve something impossible, I won't get that promotion that I want so badly, or rather that my ego wants so badly. But the thing is that in the world of the impossible, in the world of unformedness, before we've actually started to put words to it and write it on a spreadsheet, that's where luck lives, I think. If to bring it closer to home, luck lives in our unconscious mind. Luck lives in our universal collected unconsciousness. Luck is part of the structure of life and always has been, just like quantum theory always has been. We know that quantum theory is the best show in town. We also know that the theory of relativity is still the best show in town, and yet they're both different shows being put on in the same theatre. And it seems to work somehow, and it shouldn't. That's why people now are talking about string theory. They're basically saying we've got 20 theatres all at once, all living in a different time, space, dimension, doing different things at the same time. And if they are right, and some of the top people say we know this is crazy, but it's still the best show in town, string theory, because every time we test it, we just can't find anything better. So that might be an answer for where luck comes from. And it could be an answer for where déjà vu comes from. Déjà vu can be a sign of luck. You know, that feeling that you have when I've been here before. I know what's going to happen next. So you're not surprised. You found yourself in a good position and something good is starting to happen to you. Sports people talk about that. You know, they'll say, I woke up this morning, I just knew this was going to happen. I knew today was going to be my day. I didn't tell anybody because they thought I'd be crazy, but I just knew I was going to get this result. So I don't know what you think about all that, Christine.
I'm not able to formulate an intelligent answer. I just love the idea of exploring it. I suppose part of it is recognizing when it is luck.
Yes. Well, I think that is, I think that is an intelligent answer, to just explore it, and see where the journey takes you. So, you know, I can't make my mind up whether we're all on a path through life. Einstein certainly felt that we were very, very strongly. He said things like there's no such thing as free will. You know, every event in nature and everything is preordained. So they call that, I think in the religious word for that is preordination, isn't it, or something like that. And his views were strong enough. He was excommunicated from his Jewish faith, which he believed in very strongly, because they don't believe in that. They believe in free will. And Einstein didn't. So your head starts to go around in circles when you think about things like that. So yeah, I think we explore luck. We are like the farmer. We're preparing the field. We don't know how good the crop's going to be this year, and it doesn't matter how much we want a big harvest. Us hoping and praying for it probably won't make very much difference. But there are things we can do, like making sure that, you know, the ground is prepared, that we haven't shoved too many chemicals into it, that there's still somewhere hiding a few bacteria who are lucky enough to live and help the soil break down and make the plants grow. We can do, good farmers will do all of that. And then really it is in the lap of the gods, literally. And there are no people who can complain about the weather in so many different ways than farmers. I know that because my grandfather was a farmer. And I hope that he had many great characteristics, but I hope I didn't inherit that one. Because farmers are never very happy in my experience, even though they're driving around in big cars a lot of the time. And they're always saying they're not making any money, but well, they're getting it from somewhere. So there we are. That's where luck might be.
Okay. Anyone? Okay, so then I go. I've changed my question, but I will touch on Christine's question. So, what can we do? Get more lucky. I know you described that, a few principles in your book. Get lucky. So, can you just say a few words about that? What can we do? What changes we can do in ourselves, I suppose, to bring the luck to our lives?
A lot of it is mindset. A lot of it is having a fair degree of belief that one can be lucky and that one can succeed and one can be successful, but without believing it too much. So once people start desperately wanting to achieve something, and when it becomes a fight, that's usually when they start heading in the wrong direction. One of the books that I wrote, which is still around, is called Push It, Open Doors. And I have a feeling I must have mentioned this on another show. But the title's the important one there, Push It, Open Doors. when one is doing the right thing, when one starts to feel there is some kind of path that we're on or some river we're following, things that we thought were problems seem to disappear. The external circumstances might change, or it could be that we suddenly find somebody who can help us with this problem, who's faced this kind of problem before, found answers to it. And this is sometimes what I know I've mentioned this to Greg in the past. I call it buying the ticket to Bombay, because there is this story, which is a true story of the days in the early 1900s, I guess, when it was a really, really big thing for people to travel, and it was an even bigger thing for people to attempt to climb Everest. And there were these two people who I think were, I don't know whether they're from the UK or the States, but it didn't matter how many times they looked at the maps that they had, they couldn't find a way that they thought they would have any chance of getting to the summit, let alone the thin air or the almost total lack of oxygen. And they got to the point where they were saying to each other, this is just impossible. And they didn't have a huge amount of money. And one or other of them said, that kind of thinking isn't going to help. I don't know more than you. I don't know more than you how we're going to do this. But what we can do is we can take a small step, actually quite a big step, and we can go and book ourselves 2 seats to Bombay. We can buy our tickets to Bombay. And by doing that, they had put what they called the stake in the ground. That was commitment, that was intention. And so many people have said, once you commit, once you make intention, things start to get behind you very often. And I think that comes, that's the secret is, that book that everybody's read, most people have read, Think and Grow Rich, it's another one. And people in their own ways have said, put the stake in the ground. My sports coach used to say, the hardest part about going out to practice when it's cold and raining is putting your boots on. Once you put your boots on, the rest is going to happen. And I was having this same discussion with somebody this morning, walking around Hyde Park, a business meeting, socially distanced. I think it's probably the first person really I've spoken to in 12 weeks who's actually, because we're not allowed, until recently we weren't allowed to do that. We can now, we can go out and meet somebody as long as we stay 2 meters apart. So we were having that discussion amongst others, good practice for the show tonight. So that's one thing, Greg. And the other way that I say that is I say, to get lucky, you have to put yourself in the game, which is more or less the same thing. I don't tell people that if they get lucky, they can win a lottery. That's not a very good example. But what is a good example is that I can definitely guarantee that if a person doesn't buy a lottery ticket, I can guarantee they won't win. Even I know that. But so many people complain, they've never won the lottery. They've never won a ticket. Why would they complain? It's like a lady that I've mentioned before, who I'd given her some, in those days there were cassettes that Paul McKenna used to make, I Can Make You Thin. This lady wanted to lose a few pounds. So I had so many of these things, I gave it to her, a boxed set. And I saw her a couple of months later, and I didn't want to say anything. I just had a quick look at her and said, well, couldn't see that she'd lost any weight. Anyway, she brought the subject up. She said, it's not working. Those tapes aren't working. I said, oh, I'm really sorry. And Paul will be really sorry when I tell him, even though he doesn't know who you are. He won't be happy with that. He'll be upset. So I said, was there anything you didn't like his voice or you didn't like the methods? She said, oh, I haven't listened to them yet. They're still in the cupboard. But I just thought that by having them in the house, it would help me lose weight. Well, maybe that's not as crazy as it sounds, actually. Maybe they could with some people. But I think sometimes it's good to give a little nudge to get lucky or to lose a bit of weight or to climb Everest. There are some things we can do. We don't have to totally be unprepared for anything in life. I think you'd be pretty crazy to climb Everest without any preparation at all. And the other thing to remember, which is in the same vein really, is is we don't really need to make any luck, because another thing I say to clients pretty early on is you do already have luck inside you. You may not think so at the moment, but you do, because we all do. It's that we're good at blocking luck. We're good at getting in our own way. This is where ego comes in again. I would say that luck is, if somebody says, well, where inside me is luck? I'd say, I'd say it's got to be in your mind, in your brain. And we know it's not going to be an ego, so that only leaves the unconscious mind. So I'd say, I think we'll find luck in there. Because you see, people have, some people would struggle with the word luck. Many people would struggle with that. But fortunately, we have other words that mean pretty much the same thing. And most people are happy with one of those words. And the words we use are synchronicity. We talk about coincidences. We talk about serendipity. We all have some kind of word. We know what luck is. It's when something unexpected happens. And of course, we talk about good luck, but of course, yin and yang, there's always bad luck as well. Maybe we don't want to talk too much about bad luck. We don't want to get the wrong kind of intention. Better to focus on the good luck. So it's in there. It's just a question of us allowing it to speak, actually, allowing this intuition to rise. And a lot of that is to do with finding ways, unlike me at 3:30 this morning, finding ways to keep ego quiet. And there are tried and tested ways, and we've talked about them in the shows already, some of these things. We know that meditation quietens the mind and allows a deeper connection to the unconscious mind and does lots of good things. We know that havening, this psychosensory technique, we know that that can help. We've talked about heart math, and some of you have been working with heart math, which again is a kind of a meditation. There are techniques like, let me put it another way around. When I can be having a discussion with somebody, as I've mentioned before, all of my focus is on that other person. I want to see their body language. I want to hear the words that they say, but in some ways that's, I wouldn't say the least important, but it's perhaps not as important as just watching the body language and trying to read what somebody's trying to communicate to me, because language is imprecise. We all have wonderful thoughts, and language is a very imprecise way of transferring our thoughts into a medium that another person can resonate with. But when we use words to describe our emotions, we delete a lot of stuff, we distort a lot of stuff, we bend it to our own view of the world, and we have a lot of ambiguity, because just words themselves are incredibly ambiguous. One word to you, the same word can mean a different thing to me. So I can often say, they might say something like, what you're describing to me, I just can't get my arms around it. Well, I'm looking at that, and they can't actually, they don't have this picture in their mind of them being able to understand this concept or being able to embrace it. Or they might say, I just don't see that happening. And when they say something like that, you're really getting, this is very visceral, and often it will describe bad things that are stressing people. This is very visceral. When somebody says, I can't see it, they're talking about what the psychologists would call is visualization. And sports coaches in particular, I think almost every sports coach must use the word visualization or something close to it. And they will spend a lot of time with their clients, getting them to make a picture in their mind of what it is that they want to do. And it's almost like having a dress rehearsal. And I'm not a total fan of visualization, but I know that it's strong enough that all of us have the power of visualization, and all of us can do a better job of connecting to it. Because again, it's part of that law of intention. I mean, the best visualization is when you imagine something and it's so real, you believe that it's already happened. And some people will describe it like that. And when a person has a visualization like that, their chances of success, assuming they've chosen the right thing, are very high. Well, you know, my whole book, Greg, is about how people can make themselves lucky and the 7 secrets. And I've mixed a few of them up there. 6 of the secrets are pretty logical. The 7th one is not logical at all. And that's probably how I started off this evening. And I just bundled that under the one word magic. And we talked about magic a bit last week. And magic is just things that happen that we don't have an explanation for. And that would really stress a lot of people. A lot of people like to know everything about everything and know all the science behind it. But that kind of approach won't work. And the very best scientists know that. And Einstein certainly knew that. He knew there was stuff going on that couldn't be explained. And he said one day they might be. One day they might. But the chances are that they may not be. And I don't just give you another one, and then I really do hope that somebody else is going to chip in with something, a different question or their own views on some of the stuff they've heard tonight. Confidence is very important. And confidence, my definition of confidence is something that everybody else has more of than me. And by me, I mean, I think most people think like that. Most people come into me and they say, I just don't have as much confidence as other people. I wish I could be more like other people. They don't seem to worry about anything. They can go into rooms and talk to complete strangers. I can't do that. Well, they probably can, but they think they can't. And what they think is that all these other people think that they're massively confident, but of course they're thinking the same thing as the other person. And just by knowing that we're all actually more or less the same. And sometimes it takes a bit of an effort. We sometimes have to do things we don't want to do. Pushing at open doors is a great idea, but sometimes we do have to give a little bit of a shake to a door that appears to be closed. We might have to go up to somebody and say, hello, my name's Steve. Thinking about it, I've had to do much harder things than that in life. Going up to somebody and saying, hello, my name's Christine, Johnny, Gerald, Ray, Greg. It's not so difficult. And that's about as far as a conversation needs to plan, because we play the dance. The Arabs do, the nomads do this very well. They have traditional greetings. I've worked in the Middle East, and you have to talk about 50 different things in a certain way, a certain order, before you can get onto the real business of the day, if you can still remember what it is by then. But it's basically part of our social behavior. And talking to other people is part of social behavior, even though some people don't think it is. So there are tricks to confidence as well. And there are confidence anchors. Again, you can visualize times when you were very confident. You can visualize times when you were making great public speeches, when you were doing great music and stuff like that. And just remembering the good times in the past as vividly as you can is a way of fooling the unconscious mind to thinking, well, this is how it can be right now. So not sure whether those are the kind of questions you were asking, Greg, but those are just a few ways that we can be lucky.
Yeah, okay. Do we have anyone with a question, with a story? Yes, Angela.
Surprise, surprise, surprise.
I didn't realize you were on the show. I thought,
I getting in for some reason today. It was being difficult. What struck me again, and or the synchronicity, I guess is the better way to say that, is that the second time, I was watching Byron Katie before this, and it's the second time no free will has struck me and that's a jarring statement to me. And I'm wrapping my head around it as the way that she explained it was, we must do, we're a product of our thinking and believing, and therefore we're doing what we, that's what we must, if we thought and believed what somebody else did, we must do what they do. And in that manner, you're always... So I'm wrapping my head around this, and then you bring it up again with Einstein, and it's in this moment, I'm just a product of my thinking and believing. There's no free will in this moment unless I'm thinking future and past. So in this moment, I'm just doing, so the only way forward is to examine my thinking and believing. I don't know, that no free will right now just captured my full attention, that I've heard this now twice today, and it's such a earth-shattering idea to me. And I'm grasping at the corners of it. Does that make sense? I don't have a conclusion. I have a question, and it's an interesting thought, but I haven't quite.
Well, you have a conclusion and you have a question. I would say that's a pretty good start. And you don't have an answer, and I'd say that's brilliant. because I don't. It's a subject that I studied and thought an awful lot about, and sometimes it's been quite a painful examination. Because it leads you to the conclusion that all people have a reason for what they do. Whatever they do, they have a reason. And Einstein struggled with it, because I read about it. The question that people would ask him, people would say, well, what about a murderer? What about somebody who's carried out a terrible crime? Is that free will? Are you saying that they're not guilty because they had no choice, that they were driven to do this thing? And he'd say, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Well, does that mean that you would talk to that person? And he'd said, yeah, I'd talk to that person, but I wouldn't invite him to dinner. And I have a horrible feeling that much of what Einstein said was true. Predestination was the word I was struggling for a few minutes, by the way. Predestination. I mean, it's in Newtonian physics, it's an easy one, because Newtonian physics is pure. Something happens here, another thing will happen there. But human beings are way more complex. But are we all like pre-programmed puppets that are going to go through life? Well, I don't know, and I'd like to think that I'm wrong. And I actually did a video about this about a couple of years ago, and I'm struggling to remember the conclusion I came to. I know that I ended on an optimistic note. I think the conclusion I came to was that pretty much everything, our thoughts and decisions, they're genetic. I mean, we are a genetic species. We have millions of genes, and each one of us will have a slightly different genetic makeup, which is why we're slightly different people. And now, of course, what I'm about to say, I have to now ditch the collective unconscious. I'm now really back to a genetic model. But the thing that gave me hope was that the chromosomes, as I'm sure you know, they're called a double helix. They're a spiral. We talked about this last week. That's a chronicity. I think it was Ludwig who was talking about this. And the genes are all situated on this chromosome, and there'll be a matching one on the other side of this double helix. There'll be another gene that matches them, and one will be dominant, and one will be switched on, one will be switched off. And because there are these two strands that are twisted around, that's the chromosome, at the end of each one is something they call a telomere. And the best description I read of a telomere was, it's like having a shoelace, and you have a little plastic cap at the end of your shoelace, and that stops the whole thing unraveling, hopefully. And you have one at each end. Well, that's what the telomeres are. And now you can have blood tests done that will measure how long your telomeres are, how long your shoe caps are, your shoelace caps are. And if you've got long telomeres, it means you're going to live a longer life. That's what they say. And if you've got a short telomere, it means potentially you could lead a shorter life. And you can, as I said, people will pay quite a lot of money to have these genetic studies. I thought about it and I thought, I don't really want to know that. But the encouraging thing is that we've got all these scientists studying telomeres now. And if people do certain things, they can make their telomeres grow bigger. So you could start with a small telomere and of course, guess what? One of those good things is to do. If you start meditating, your telomeres grow. If you start eating good food, your telomeres start grow. So that, I sort of clung on to the hope that this demolishes the theory of that we don't have free will, because there are things we can do to change stuff.
I like that. That is, you nailed it with what the question in my mind is, because it seemed to me to be either or. Either we have free will or we're predestined, but it's somewhere in the middle of that, in that we have no free will because we are the result of our thinking and believing in this moment, yet we can examine our thinking and believing and change that thinking and believing, and therefore change the outcome. Tomorrow, I might not think and believe what I do today, therefore my outcome tomorrow, but it's a result of, rather than I don't know, we have the free will to make that choice, but in this moment right now, I have no free will. I am the result of my thinking and believing. Does that make sense? I can change if I recognize it. I'm not a zombie walking through this life with no choice in the matter. So those people, you can increase your telomeres. But as we only have this moment right now, in this moment right now, I have no free will for what I'm thinking and believing that got me here. Does that make sense?
I love that. I love that. In the moment, you have no choice. In the moment, you have no choice. Yeah, which is mostly good, mostly great, because that's where luck can come in the moment. And also, this isn't going to happen, by the way. This is not a hypnotic suggestion. You could suddenly do something crazy in the moment. Of course, you're not that sort of person. But this does have implications. I mean, it has implications for the way that we should educate our children. It has implications for the penal system. I mean, people go to prison for doing really bad stuff. What anybody in society would say is really bad stuff. But they would all say the same thing. You know, they don't know why they did it, but they did. Now, on a lesser scale, what about all of us? All of us appear to be relatively rational, rounded people, and yet all of us have done some crazy stuff, if we're honest. And when we're in lockdown for 10 weeks, we have plenty of time to think about stuff like that. And it's always with regret, you know, like, why did I do that? Well, the fact is that you did, and there's nothing you can do to undo something that's done. The only thing one can do, the only benefit of the past really is not going there to make yourself feel bad about stuff, but to go there and think there was a much better way I could have handled that situation. And that's how we learn stuff. But I mean, a lot of people go into the past too much, and that's when they start getting depressed. So you should make it a short trip. If you're going to go back to the old days, just make it a short trip and then get back to the present, where you don't have anything to apologize for because it hasn't happened yet. Okay, we have time for one last question, if there is one, or a comment.
Yeah, there was a comment from Laura when you were talking about luck.
Okay.
And she said, incidental meetings are tiny, small, but all link up seem to open up that luck window and reduce the uncertainty.
Yeah, could you read that to me again? I like that.
Incidental meetings, or tiny, small, that all link up seem to open up that luck window and reduce the uncertainty.
I like it. Yeah, well done, Laura. I like that. Yes, incidental meetings are much better than planned meetings. The weekly staff meeting, What a waste of time that is. Rah, rah, rah. Incidental meeting. Hey, why don't you come in around to my office and have a coffee? Got something I want to talk to you about. What do you want to talk about? Don't know yet. I'll know when you get here. Okay, folks, that's enough for today. Thanks for joining us again and for your wonderful questions and comments. Just remember that the answers don't matter too much. The questions are far more important. Having questions, even if we don't find answers, because having questions opens up this field of uncertainty, and it allows our neural pathways to start exploring, shoving out their tendrils in all sorts of different directions, and who knows what connections they might meet. So see you next week.